Welcome, my friend. Come closer, sit with me for a while. Let the quiet of this moment wrap around us like warm light through a window. Today, we're going to talk about something that lives inside almost every home. Something so ordinary we barely notice it anymore. Yet so powerful it once moved armies, built fortunes, and quietly changed the course of human history. Sugar. Just a pinch of white crystals. Yet when it touches your tongue, something magical happens. Your eyes close for a second. A small smile appears without you even realizing. The world feels softer, kinder, sweeter, at least for a moment. Have you ever stopped to wonder why that is? Why one taste can make us feel safe, rewarded, loved, even when we know too much of it isn't good for us? That little rush of pleasure is not an accident. It's ancient. It's built into our biology. And it all began long before anyone measured grams or wrote nutrition labels. Imagine a time when sweetness was rare, rarer than gold, rarer than silk. A time when only the very powerful could taste it. They called it medicine. They called it luxury. They called it sacred. In those days, sugar wasn't poured into coffee or stirred into dough. It was kept in locked boxes, given as gifts between kings, offered to gods, used to heal wounds, or hidden away like treasure. And yet, it started so humbly, not in a grand palace or laboratory. It started as a simple grass, tall, tough, green, growing wild in the warm, wet forests of a distant island. People chewed the stalks. They sucked the juice. They discovered joy in that first drop of sweetness running down their chin. From there, the story began to travel. Across oceans, through deserts, along trade routes lined with spice and silk. It crossed empires, survived wars, fueled greed, and quietly slipped into every corner of daily life. Sugar didn't just sweeten food. It sweetened power. It sweetened cruelty. It sweetened progress. And sometimes, it sweetened suffering. So today, my friend, let's walk that long path together. From the first chewed stalk in a jungle clearing, to the mountains of white crystals on supermarket shelves, to the quiet questions we now ask ourselves every time we reach for something sweet. Are you ready? Then let's begin. The epic history of sugar starts now. Long before there were candy bars, lollipops, or even honey in jars, sweetness came from something very simple and wild. It all began around 8000 BCE, maybe even earlier, in the warm, rainy forests of New Guinea, what we now call Papua New Guinea. There, in those thick green jungles, people discovered a tall, tough grass with thick stems. They called it sugarcane. At first, they didn't know how to make crystals or sugar powder. They simply broke the stalks, peeled the outer layer, and chewed the fibrous inside. Sweet juice filled their mouths, like nature's own candy. Children laughed as the sticky liquid ran down their chins. Adults felt a burst of energy after a long day of hunting or gathering. That first taste wasn't just food. It was joy. Pure, simple, wild joy. Over thousands of years, the knowledge of sugarcane slowly traveled. From island to island in the Pacific, then westward to the Philippines, Indonesia, and finally to the Indian subcontinent around 3500 to 500 BCE. In India, people didn't stop at chewing. They became the first to unlock the secret of real sugar. They learned to crush the canes, press out the juice, then carefully boil it in large clay pots over open fire. As the water evaporated, the liquid thickened, and tiny crystals began to form at the edges. They called those first crystals khanda or shark era, words that later became sugar and sucrose in other languages. It was a slow, patient process, hours of watching, stirring, tasting. But when the crystals cooled and hardened, they had something new, something powerful. In ancient India, sugar wasn't just another ingredient. It was medicine. Healers mixed it into herbal pastes to soothe sore throats, heal wounds, or give strength to the weak. It was spice, added to rich curries and rice dishes to balance heat with sweetness. And it was luxury. Only the wealthy, the priests, and the kings could enjoy it regularly. Common people still chewed raw cane when they could find it. But the elite kept refined sugar in special clay jars or wrapped in palm leaves. Precious, guarded, almost sacred. So long before factories or supermarkets, sugar was born twice. First as a wild grass that people chewed for pleasure, then as shining crystals born from fire and patience in ancient Indian kitchens. It was medicine, spice, and luxury all at once. And from those humble beginnings in jungle clearings and clay pots, a sweetness that would one day travel the world, changing everything it touched. After India unlocked the secret of crystallizing sugar, the knowledge didn't stay hidden in the subcontinent. It traveled west, carried by traders, scholars, and conquerors. Around the 6th to 10th century CE, the Persians first took sugarcane cultivation and refining techniques from India. They improved the process, better boiling methods, clearer filtering with cloth and charcoal, and they started shaping the hot syrup into tall, pointed cones. Those cones, called canned or al-sukkar, became the standard way to store and sell sugar. The Arabs, during the Islamic Golden Age, perfected it even further. In Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo, sugar houses like small factories sprang up. They used special molds to create beautiful cones, sometimes decorated with patterns or dyed with plant colors. Sugar was no longer just a rare treat. It became a prized commodity in the bustling markets of the Middle East. Traders carried it along the Silk Road and sea routes, and the word sugar began to spread in many languages. By the 8th and 9th centuries, Arab physicians wrote about sugar in medical books. They prescribed it for coughs, stomach problems, and even as an energy booster for soldiers. It was still very expensive, so costly that only the wealthy could use it regularly. But its reputation grew. Sugar was seen as a healing gift from nature, a bridge between food and medicine. When the Crusades began in the 11th century, European knights and pilgrims encountered sugar for the first time in the Holy Land. They tasted it in Arab camps, in Jerusalem markets, in the palaces of Damascus. To them, it was exotic, almost magical. They brought small amounts back to Europe as souvenirs, but also as medicine. Monks in monasteries started experimenting with it, mixing sugar into herbal tonics, calling it sweet salt or Indian salt. At first, it was kept in apothecaries, locked away like rare drugs. In medieval Europe, sugar remained a luxury for centuries. Only kings, queens, bishops, and very rich merchants could afford it. A single pound could cost as much as a cow or a month's wages for a laborer. It was served at royal banquets, sprinkled over meat, stirred into wine, shaped into sculptures for decoration. People believed it had almost mystical powers. It could preserve fruit, cure melancholy, give strength to the sick. But because it was so rare, most ordinary people never tasted it. They heard stories about this sweet spice from the East, but it stayed out of reach, a symbol of wealth and distant wonders. So the Arabs didn't just adopt sugar, they perfected it. They turned it into white crystals in elegant cones, traded it across continents, and gave it a name that would echo for centuries: al-sukkar. To Europe, it arrived as exotic medicine, something only kings could afford. But the taste lingered in their memory, and soon they would want more, much more. After the Arabs and Persians perfected sugar, Europe still craved more. They wanted it in larger quantities, but the Old World climate wasn't suitable for large-scale sugarcane fields. Then came Christopher Columbus. In 1493, on his second voyage, he brought sugarcane cuttings from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean, specifically to Hispaniola, now Haiti and Dominican Republic. The plant loved the hot sun, rich soil, and heavy rain of the islands. Within a few decades, Portugal and Spain turned the Caribbean into the world's first major sugar-producing region. Small farms quickly grew into large plantations. But there was a problem. Harvesting sugarcane is backbreaking work. Cutting stalks, crushing them, boiling the juice, it required hundreds of hands. At first, Europeans tried using local indigenous people, but disease and overwork wiped out most of the native population. So they looked across the Atlantic for labor. By the 17th and 18th centuries, England, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark joined the race. They claimed islands: Barbados, Jamaica, Saint-Domingue, Haiti, Cuba, Guadeloupe, Martinique. These became massive sugar plantations, thousands of acres of green cane stretching to the horizon. The crop was so valuable that people started calling it white gold. 1 ton of sugar could buy a ship or a mansion back in London or Paris. But to produce that gold, plantations needed constant labor year-round, dawn to dusk. That's when the transatlantic slave trade exploded. Millions of Africans were kidnapped, chained, and shipped across the ocean in horrific conditions. They arrived in the Caribbean exhausted, terrified, and forced into endless work under the whip, cutting cane with machetes, feeding the mills, stirring boiling cauldrons of juice, all under the burning sun. Many died young from exhaustion, disease, or punishment, yet their labor made Europe rich beyond imagination. Sugar didn't just make money, it created a whole new economic system. The infamous triangular trade. Ships carried enslaved people from Africa to the Caribbean, sugar and rum from the islands to Europe, then manufactured goods and more slaves back to Africa. Cities like Liverpool, Bristol, Nantes, and Amsterdam grew wealthy on this trade. Banks, insurance companies, and shipping lines were built on sugar profits. Even everyday items, cotton cloth, iron tools, were traded for human lives. Sugar fueled early capitalism. It connected continents in a brutal web of commerce. But behind every spoonful in a London teacup or a Versailles dessert was unimaginable suffering. Sugar went to the New World and changed everything. Plantations needed labor. Millions of enslaved Africans were brought in chains. Sugar made empires rich, built cities, funded wars, but at a terrible, terrible cost. The sweetness that once healed and delighted now carried shadows of cruelty and exploitation. And yet, the demand only grew. Europe couldn't get enough. The world had tasted sugar and it wanted more, so much more. By the late 18th century, Europe was hooked on sugar. They couldn't get enough. Tea, coffee, chocolate, pastries, all needed that sweet touch. But most of it still came from distant Caribbean plantations. Then came a crisis. In 1806, Napoleon Bonaparte declared the Continental Blockade. No British goods, no British ships, no British sugar. Cane sugar from the colonies suddenly became scarce and insanely expensive. Europe panicked. They needed a new source, something that could grow closer to home in cooler climates. The answer had actually been discovered decades earlier. In 1747, a German chemist named Andreas Sigismund Marggraf found that sugar beets, those humble white root vegetables, contained sucrose, the same sweet compound as sugarcane. He boiled the beets, extracted the juice, and crystallized small amounts of sugar. It worked, but the process was slow and inefficient. Napoleon seized the idea. He offered huge prizes and funding to anyone who could make beet sugar production practical. By 1811, factories began appearing in France and Germany. Farmers started planting beets in fields across northern Europe. It wasn't as sweet as cane at first, but it grew in cold soil, and it didn't require oceans or slavery to produce. Then came the real revolution, machines. In the 19th century, engineers invented vacuum pans, sealed vessels that boiled juice at lower temperatures, preserving more flavor and saving fuel. Multiple effect evaporators use steam from one pan to heat the next, making the process faster and cheaper. Centrifuges spun the syrup to separate crystals from molasses. Refining became industrial. Factories churned out tons of granulated white sugar every day. Suddenly, sugar wasn't a luxury anymore. It became cheap. It became ordinary. A working family could afford to sweeten their tea every morning. Bakeries filled with cakes and biscuits. Candy shops opened on every corner. Sugar slipped into bread, sauces, canned foods everywhere. What was once guarded in royal boxes now filled supermarket shelves in paper bags. When cane's supply was cut off, Europe turned to beets. Machines made sugar cheap suddenly in every home. The sweetness that once belonged to kings now belonged to everyone, and the world would never taste the same again. Entering the 20th century, sugar was no longer a rare luxury. It was becoming everywhere. World War I and II actually accelerated its use. Soldiers received sugar rations for quick energy, and governments encouraged sugar in food to keep morale high. After the wars, food companies discovered something new. Sugar makes everything taste better and last longer. They started adding it to bread, ketchup, cereals, yogurt, salad dressings, even canned vegetables. Then came the biggest change of all in the 1970s, high fructose corn syrup, or HFCS. It was invented in the United States from cheap corn. HFCS is sweeter than regular sugar, cheaper to produce, and mixes easily into liquids. Soda companies loved it. Soft drinks became huge. One can could contain 10 teaspoons of sugar. Breakfast cereals marketed to children were loaded with it. Fast food chains added sugary sauces and desserts. Suddenly, sugar wasn't just something you added, it was hidden in almost every packaged food. By the late 20th and early 21st century, the average person consumed far more sugar than ever before, sometimes 150 grams or more per day. We drank it in coffee, tea, energy drinks, fruit juices labeled healthy. We ate it in snacks, cookies, ice cream, chocolate bars. Supermarket shelves were full of colorful packages promising happiness in every bite. Advertising made sugar feel like comfort, celebration, love. But slowly, doctors and scientists began to speak up. Too much sugar was linked to weight gain, fatty liver, tooth decay, inflammation. Obesity rates climbed. Type 2 diabetes spread around the world, even in children. What once healed now harmed when taken in excess. The sweetness that built empires was quietly contributing to a global health crisis. People started looking for alternatives. Natural sweeteners like stevia, from a South American plant, and monk fruit extract became popular because they give sweetness without calories or blood sugar spikes. Artificial options like aspartame, sucralose, and saccharin filled diet sodas and low-sugar products. Some companies began removing added sugar from recipes or labeling it clearly. Governments added sugar taxes on soft drinks in many countries. Schools banned sugary snacks. More people chose whole foods, fruit instead of candy, plain yogurt instead of sweetened. The conversation shifted. Sweetness isn't bad, but balance matters. Sugar exploded in the 20th century, hidden in everything we ate and drank. Now we know too much isn't sweet anymore. It can quietly damage our bodies and our future. But we're also learning, finding better ways, more mindful choices, and healthier sweetness. The story of sugar isn't over. It's still unfolding, and so are we. So here we are, at the end of this long, sweet journey. Sugar started as a wild grass in ancient jungles, chewed for simple joy. It became crystals in Indian kitchens, medicine in Arab markets, luxury in European courts. Then it crossed oceans, fueled empires, built fortunes on suffering, and finally exploded into every food we eat. It gave us comfort, energy, celebration, but also quiet damage when we took too much. Now, in our time, we're waking up. The story isn't finished. It's still being written. The future of sweetness is already taking shape. Low-sugar alternatives are growing fast. Stevia, monk fruit, allulose, natural tastes without the calories or spikes. Scientists are experimenting with lab-grown sweeteners, molecules made in bioreactors, identical to sugar but cleaner and kinder to the body. Governments add sugar taxes, clearer labels, limits in schools. More people choose fruit over soda, whole foods over processed snacks. We're learning balance. Sweetness as a treat, not a staple. Sugar teaches us something deep. Sweetness can build empires and break bodies. From jungle grass to global addiction, it keeps changing us, showing how one simple thing can shape history, health, and hope. The crystals we once treasured now come with questions. But questions are good. They mean we're still growing, still choosing, still unfolding. Thank you for walking this path with me. What everyday object should we explore next? Comment below. I'm listening. Until then, stay curious, stay balanced, and enjoy the sweetness in your own way.